Well, thank you very much, Radhika. Greetings from Pakistan, and it's been a pleasure listening to such scholarly, informed presentations based on empirical analysis of China's remarkable success story. In my brief remarks, and it's a pleasure to be in this platform of the Friends of Socialist China, and I wish you good luck for the future. In my brief remarks, I'd like to focus on our own experience as a Pakistani and Pakistan-China relations and how it has been important, because when I first went to China, it was in 1970, as she mentioned, and it was a flight from Pakistan to China on a PIA plane. There were some travelers from some Latin American and other Asian countries, and it was a voyage of discovery for me, for a 17-year-old who was visiting as president of the Pakistan-China Youth Friendship Association. And I remember that when we boarded the Chinese flight, airlines flight from Shanghai to Beijing, the flight, there was no, of course, actually a flight attendant, which was more dressed like a red guard. The lady said, "We begin our flight with a quotation from Chairman Mao." And I still remember the quotation: "Be resolute, fear no sacrifice, and surmount every difficulty to win victory." And when we landed in Beijing, it was amazing to see a country with huge boulevards. We were staying in Peking Hotel, now it's called Beijing Hotel. And there were empty boulevards, a lot of cyclists, but there was this spirit, the resilience of the Chinese people, you could feel that. And I was lucky to see it was a period of the Cultural Revolution, plays like The White-Haired Girl, The Red Detachment of Women. And we met Chen Boda. He was the head of the Cultural Revolution group of the Central Committee of the Communist Party. So China was in a bit of a turbulence those days, because the Cultural Revolution was at its peak. But what impressed me was that there was a certain element, poverty was there, but the pride was also there. Pride that Chinese were finally the masters of their own destiny. And now then I understood the meaning of the word when Chairman Mao announced on 1st of October 1949 that the Chinese people have stood up. So those after the century of humiliation. And since that period, I went again in different periods. I remember the period of Deng Xiaoping, when there was a big banner in the Shanghai airport saying, "Getting rich is glorious." So there was a transformation when China was opening up. I think the roots of China's successful eradication of poverty, extreme poverty, lies in the Chinese Revolution itself. And I think the period from when, after the Long March, when the Communist Party leadership and the People's Liberation Army, they built their base in Yunnan. And I was reading this book by John S. Service, which is a remarkable book, because it is based on a first-hand account of what was going on in Yunnan by John S. Service, this American diplomat who was later hounded out of the State Department by the McCarthyites. And he gives a very good profile. And I think the two elements that stand out is the clarity of policy of the Communist Party while they are not in power yet, and the quality of leadership. And he does a profile of Chairman Mao, Zhou Enlai, Marshal Chu De, and all the other marshals who were there, Chen Yi, Ho Lung, and others. So it's an amazing element that in Yunnan, they had built up a successful mini socialist China. There was a University of Resistance, which had about 10,000 graduates. They had a women's university. They had the largest arts academy in China. They had a pharma factory. They had a publishing house. So it was already, the makings of new China were already in place in Yunnan from that base, from that period, from the Long March till about 45 or so when the war resumed against Chiang Kai-shek. I would say that three elements have been very, very important in this campaign. Eradication of poverty was the first priority. Then the emancipation of women. That was a very crucial element for China, which a lot of other Asian countries even today have not been able to do. Because that when Chairman Mao said the women hold half the sky, he really meant it, because he took them out of the shackles of male chauvinism, of a patriotic society, of being sheltered in their houses, foot binding and so forth, and then unleash their energies. And of course, the energies were unleashed in also negative directions by Madame Jiang Qing. But otherwise, the Chinese women, I think without their role as members of the workforce, this kind of transformation would not have been possible. The other important element, which I think was very important also, was a peaceful foreign policy. Unlike other countries which were progressing, which were rising, China has not had any imperial ambitions. China is the only country which has risen, which has developed without invading, without conquering any territory. And I think that is a very key element in their success story. I remember a conversation which was reported 3 years ago between President Trump and President Carter. And this was, I think, about in 2018 or 19. And Trump tells Carter, and he's president, that, look here, the Chinese are getting ahead of us. How do we respond to China? And China will soon be a major power. And Carter says, it's very simple. I normalized relations with China in 1979. For the last 40 years, China has been at peace with itself, while we have been at war throughout this period. That is the crucial difference. I think the focus on development. And I remember 1 hour long conversation when I first met Xi Jinping. He was vice president. And this was in 2010 or 11. And it was in the Great Hall of the People. And when we talked about issues, I found him a leader with a difference. He was not relying on any notes or any advice from his aides. He was clear. He gave a clear vision of China from 2010 till 2050 for the next 40 years. And the focus was inward development and good neighborly relations. And Pakistan has been very fortunate that we as a neighbor of China have been benefiting from this strategic partnership that we have developed with China for the last 50 or 60 years. And in the Belt and Road Initiative, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, is the flagship. And China has invested heavily in that, and it has benefited Pakistan. For a time, I was, when CPEC was launched in 2015, I was the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on CPEC, involving all the political parties to take it forward. And today, and because of that CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, we had a 5.8% growth rate in the first phase. 75,000 Pakistanis got job. Women empowerment in the backward and less developed areas of Pakistan. We have had women driving dumper trucks, women playing a very active role, and also 28,000 Pakistani students now studying in China, 25,000 learning the Chinese language in Pakistan. So it has been a game changer for Pakistan, eliminating the energy crisis, building up ports and highways, and now also focusing on socio-economic development, because now the focus has shifted from infrastructure and power projects to socio-economic development at the grassroots level. So the Chinese model has been very, very important, the developmental model. And that developmental model has been different than the West, because there has been an element of also egalitarianism involved in that. People talk of Jiang Zemin, who was later president of China. When he was in Pakistan in 1971 as an engineer, along with a group of engineers who were helping us in defense production, it was a difference between the American, US aid specialist and also with the Chinese. So the Chinese success story is something that we all should learn from. And I think this has become a new model for developing countries. And the final thing I'd say is that on this issue of coronavirus pandemic, China has been outstanding in helping countries like Pakistan with vaccines, with personal protective equipment, and with other masks, face masks, no strings attached. And I think that is a qualitative difference between China and some of our Western friends who always have a political agenda behind all their support. Thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure to be in such august company.